for more on this, let's cross live now to geopolitical analyst Joe Mhlanga, who's joining us now from South Africa. Thanks very much, Joe. What was your initial reaction to this drone incident above the Kremlin?
It was very shocking for the desperate move to even want to poke the bear, basically provoking and threatening the life of number one in Russia. Russia being a nuclear power, we all know the consequences of such that could happen, that could affect the whole entire world. You'll ask yourself three questions. Who's behind it? Who gains from it? What message is somebody trying to send to take a risky and miscalculated action like that? It can only be coming from one direction, that is the West. A few weeks ago, John Kirby said the ceasefire or the truce or peace in Ukraine is not an option for them. So this makes you wonder, why would Washington or Pentagon make such a statement? So it's something that somebody will gain out of this, but the actual people of Ukraine will suffer the consequences by what the West has done. If they used Elon Musk's satellite, what else? If the Americans were the ones behind the satellites or the drones that were used, they were using Elon Musk's satellite, it can only come from one direction.
Well, we have to say this is just speculation at this point. We don't know what technology was used or who was behind it. And indeed, Kiev said that it doesn't know anything about what's happened above the Kremlin. But do you think this will lead to further escalation in the war between the two sides?
Unfortunately, this is, we had Nord Stream 2 that happened. And now this is happening. It's putting Russia into a very compromised position where Russia will be forced to respond. Yes, it will escalate, but let's look at something here. Russia has been very disciplined in terms of, when you look at all the head of states that visited Ukraine, Russia could have done anything, including Joe Biden himself. So Russia has been very disciplined in terms of, they knew the data, who was going to Ukraine, the airplane, they knew the whole schedule, but they never even once attempted a life of a head of state or whoever is visiting there. So this is more of a provocation into wanting to see an escalation between the two countries. And this tells you exactly that the West does not want to see Ukraine be at peace with Russia. So they will do anything, whatever it takes. Of course, we can't necessarily say that Ukraine can fully admit. They might not even admit, because it could have been that is not even their ideas. The speculation will point into one direction again, that it could have come from the Western countries who don't necessarily want to see Russia and Ukraine finish this conflict.
What do you expect the West to say about this incident? Do we expect any reaction there from Western countries about this?
There will be reaction. Number one, what the West will say. They'll say, oh no, Russia probably did this so that they could respond, or so that they can deviate from this counter-offensive, or so that they can put more strikes on Ukraine. Those are some of the things that they'll do. You'll expect these things in Western media, where they will push it back to Russia to say, oh no, it's almost impossible for anybody, for any drone to go to Kremlin, because it's a highly secured environment. They will try to speculate on that. Nothing will be positive that will come from the West that will mean that themselves or Ukraine were behind this. They will deny, but the direction. And also, they don't necessarily respect. You don't trust anything that they say or that they do. What they say is different from what they do. Mm-hmm. So their reaction, it's the same old story. There's no change. They don't change their script. It's the same old story we're going to be hearing from their bullhorns channels. They will be saying one and the same thing. So there's nothing that would be spectacular coming from the West in this regard.
Now, finally, Joe, I just want to get your thoughts on what you make of the timing of the attack. Obviously, there are the May Day celebrations, May the 9th in Russia, a very significant holiday. Also, a much anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive has been widely reported in the West. Do you think the timing of this is significant?
Yes, it is. I mean, one of Ukrainian officials did say, no, let's make a holiday. You know, let's send them a holiday with something, because they've been talking about this counteroffensive. At the same time, May, it's a month that is very significant to Russian people. So the distraction was going to come from there. Or they were worried that Russia could step up the operation so that by May 9, that's a very important day for Russians, then they can focus on the celebrations. Or they wanted to create a distraction just so they can get Russians to be unsettled and also create a lot of chaos within the Russian airspace.
Well, geopolitical analyst Joe Mhlanga, thanks very much for your input here today on RT International.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me jog your memory there. If you recall that incident where Ukraine, for the first time, they tried to assassinate Putin in his residence. So for our viewers, so that they understand. So the Kremlin is the equivalent of the White House in the US, or our union building. So Ukraine, in that incident, they tried to send a drone to assassinate President Putin at that time. Just refresh us on that. You gave a good analysis. Can you pick up on that and refresh?
Yeah, firstly, I must say that it was very interesting that I was one of the few people that RT called to give analysis as when that happened. So to actually give analysis on the president, it was not the first time, but it was exciting to give analysis on something so very crucial. But look, there were things that came to mind when I'm watching this. I think this happened a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 2023 or 2023. I'm not sure. But
I think it was around about 2023.
Yeah, must have been 2023. So the West at that time, I think Boris Johnson was still in the office. He was very instrumental in wanting this conflict to carry on. And majority of the Ukrainians were not understanding, why do we have to fight? These guys are too big. But why do we have to fight these guys? What is it that we get? Because there's a genuine concern in those regions where we know that our neo-Nazi government is abusing the Russian-speaking people. And another confusion that was coming from a lot of Ukrainians, I was talking to some who are based in Odessa. They were saying it's very confusing that Zelensky himself is a Russian-speaking Ukrainian. But why is this guy wanting us to fight? But the main thing was to distract Russia, to keep Russia in check. It was a checkmate kind of move, because they were worried that that week Putin wouldn't postpone the celebration day. So he could, in the 1st of May, he could go hard on these guys so that when that day comes, that week, because they would be moving a lot of military hardware around Red Square when they do the drills before the main event. So they wouldn't want to do that moving like your intercontinental missile, the nickname Saturn, the one that could get to New York within 18 minutes from Moscow. They wouldn't want to have distraction when they're moving such sensitive equipment. So I saw that as a miscalculated move, but there was an agenda around that move to send a message to say, small as we are, we've got big brothers and we can pinpoint exactly where you are, you know. And I did mention there on how are they getting this correct targets, because they knew that this guy could have been in Kremlin, and if this guy is giving them satellite, they watch the movement, they watch what you do and how you move. So my assumption at the time and the information I was getting from my sources was that the main agenda, there was fear from the West that these guys could go all the way in Kiev so that they could have a celebration day. But there was a lot of confusion, especially on the Ukrainian side. But what was then confusing to many, we were still not sure that Elon Musk was using his technology in Ukraine, because you would have assumed that Elon Musk was more on the Rockefeller camp. That was a Biden administration. Then you start to understand that, okay, these two families somewhere, somehow, they can come together if they have a common enemy, that is Russia. So as you might have seen, that every single president who came to the office, one way or the other, they championed war, somewhere, somehow. No matter how much they say in their campaigns to say, oh, we'll bring the soldiers. Obama said it, we'll bring all our soldiers back from Iraq. And the soldiers are still there even today. When Trump came, he said within 1 day or 1 hour, he will stop the war in Ukraine. But many people did not realize that when Trump said that, he's not a mediator. He's direct involved in the conflict. So US is actually using Ukraine to fight their proxy war. So whatever move happened at that time, it was mostly influenced by the West to make sure that, because every victory day, it's an egg in the face for the West. So, because they are trying to erase Russia as far as the defeat of the Nazis. So those are all the aspects that I was looking at and the information I was getting. But it's strange that I'm watching this maybe after 2 years and looking at how advanced the war was at that time, how much more now. And also there's a second attempt of Putin's chopper. I'm not sure if you heard or you saw that, but you might like to touch on that yourself. On what do you actually understand? What is the desperate thing about wanting to take him out? We know that there's been many attempts on his life, many attempts, but this one was very stupid, because Biden landed in Kiev on the 10th of May. The whole European drug gang met in Kiev, wanting to rubbish that was happening. I mean, Russia had the whole information, because you cannot land in Kiev without asking permission from Russia, because you don't want your aeroplanes to be bombed, to be taken down. But why this now? Because part of the rules of the war, you don't touch the head of state. Remember, when Putin is sitting in Sochi, he can monitor Zelensky's movement from the kitchen to the bathroom, and how many times he has sex, how many times he sniffs cocaine. He can do all of that. Now the question is, but in your opinion, why would Zelensky do something like that right now?
Yeah, it was a foolish move, and we'll get back to something that you just mentioned, the involvement of Starlink in that attack, which was obviously was a big move. We'll get to that, but just to touch on your question, you see the way the West view Russia is quite distorted, because they think that Putin is this one powerful guy that controls everything and anything that happens in Russia. He's a one-man show. He operates alone. There are no structures. Everyone listens to him. So the thinking is that if you get rid of Putin tomorrow, the Russian Federation is going to surrender, is going to stop the war, is not going to be an enemy of the West, is not going to be friends with China, is not going to support Traore and Burkina Faso, is not going to support Central African Republic and all the other African states. So the thinking is very flawed. And we are actually very fortunate. Had they succeeded in assassinating President Putin, we would have had World War III on the spot. You do not attempt a life on a nuclear-armed country, let alone a superpower, a country that have over 5,000 nuclear warheads that is capable of destroying the world 5 times over without even breaking the sweat. So it was a very stupid move. Like you said, it was also an attempt by Zelensky to show his puppet masters that he is bold enough to take the fight right to Russia. Because the selection of the attack, obviously a drone is not capable of destroying a fortified complex like the Kremlin.
The Kremlin,
but it was an attempt to say we can do this. We can pick the bull by the horns and nothing will happen. So it was a provocation, and I'm very impressed on how Putin was not baited, because the bait was to provoke him so that he goes and do something wild, and they will turn around and say, look at him, there's a madman attacking innocent people. But the level of restraint was quite significant. And I think we'll touch on the details, Bud, of how such an attack can be coordinated for them to be able to reach Moscow, which is about 400 kilometers plus from the Ukrainian border.
There's something that, when you unpack, you just reminded me of something that I think Zelensky is well aware. From the Soviet Union days, in the office, or should I say in the war room, where all the machineries are operated with your drones, with your nuclear, all the warheads, whatever direction they are facing, they have a time limit that all the people who are responsible for the operational, tactical side of it, if they don't respond in X number of minutes, if there's nobody who's responding, is set to go and attack each and every country that they're at odds with it.
Yeah, it's actually called the dead hand system.
Yes,
now. Yes, called the dead hand.
Yes. So why would you want to attempt that? Why are they so desperate to a point where they're risking everything? What's there? Yeah. Because now the deal is, I mean, we know Crimea is in Russia. There's a place called Yalta in Crimea where the big three met, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill. It was in Crimea. And they bombed that bridge. And the historical facts are there that some of these areas are Russian. A referendum was done. Putin did not need to do a referendum. No, there was no need for that because it was a given. But the manner in which Kiev was treating the Russian-speaking Ukrainians, it's unfair, including his own family members, some that ran back to Russia. So
let me pause you there, Bud, because you are touching a very important area. You know, we talk these things so easily because perhaps you and I and others understand the genesis of that crisis. And obviously, if you were to watch mainstream media, you would never understand why the Russians are doing what they're doing. They are seen as an aggressor, as a bully. They just want to take over Ukraine because they want to revive the Soviet Union. And obviously, after Ukraine, they're going to march into the Baltics, your Latvia,
your Poland, and all of them. Yeah.
So I want us to just maybe briefly, about 2 minutes. Let's look a bit at the genesis, because you have already touched on it, the prosecution of the Russian speaking people in Ukraine, because obviously we know in 2014, Russia took back Crimea, and I'm using the word deliberately so. They took back what was theirs, because Crimea was obviously given to Ukraine by Stalin. But you're then talking about Eastern Ukraine, which is the hotbed of the fighting. Just take us through, from the coup d'etat that happened in 2014, that actually led to the start of the war in 2022, and I'll come in after you.
When Viktor Yanukovych was the president, or he was a democratically elected president of Ukraine, but at that time he was very, very friendly with Russia. There's still a lot of debts that Ukraine has not paid, and they said they're not going to pay. Russia must just do whatever they want. They will keep what they keep, and they take what they take, whatever the case was. But because of the biolabs that Viktor wanted to deal with, he was giving a lot of information also to the Russians. He was also informing Putin on monthly basis of the things that were happening there, that the Americans were testing some of these things on ordinary people. But the people that were used as guinea pigs were the people mostly from the eastern region. And remember, the natural resources of Ukraine, it's mostly in the east. So they were worried that majority of that could be controlled by Russia, including the agricultural sector as well. So the Americans did not like what was happening, because Viktor was now creating a relationship with Moscow, but wanting to go after the biolabs that are there, of which now it's coming out slowly that COVID was manufactured in Ukraine in one of those biolabs, though this information was found by the Russian soldiers when they were busy taking on in the areas like Mariupol and all these other places where this whole thing was happening. So, but because the dream of the Americans or the Western countries was to break Russia apart, they had a deal. And after the Cold War was finished, they had a deal that you are not going to move an inch from where you are, because the common enemy that we had was Hitler and the Nazi influence. So what is the purpose of NATO if there's no enemy? Who are these guys going to attack? What are we protecting what are we protecting in Europe? Now, the Americans were smarter, hence their biggest base is in Germany. Now you will understand that Germany is now entering into a deal to say, we'll give the green light for Ukraine to use the long range inside Russia. You can say that it's an old plan. It's not a new plan. So Russia was uncomfortable with that. Russia knew very well that if Ukraine collapses, then NATO will move in. It will be at their doorstep, something that they agreed to say, you are not going to move. I think it was Gorbachev who signed that, to say, you are not going to move an inch. So then they agreed. Every head of state that visited Russia, or when Putin went to the West, he asked that question: can Russia join NATO? On purpose. Can Russia join NATO? Oh no, we'll think about it. We'll think about it. Though George Bush, Bill Clinton, they were much friendlier when it comes to this man. So the issues that happened then, it became so serious that Victoria Nuland was appointed by Pentagon and Washington to go and be the head of the mission in Ukraine in removing Viktor Yanukovych and put someone else. There is a tape that is now available in the public domain where she's talking. She's looking at this guy. She said, but these guys are all corrupt. So they said, no, pick the better person within. That will make sure that our interest will be guarded. So I always say this: America has no friends but the interest. So what were the interests there? One was to get closer to Russia. Two, to protect those biolabs. Those biolabs were meant to be used against Russian people should they attack Russia, because the agenda is to break Russia apart. And number three, the military strategy will be to get NATO to station right at the doorstep of Russia in Ukraine. So that is the background. But The reason why your Donbass, Luhansk, Kursk, all these other regions, they wanted to create a buffer zone there. So when they finally finish defeating Russia, they will move in, take the natural resources and control the whole thing. But everything will be controlled from Ukraine's direction. But Russia knows everything of what is happening. And Russia was patient for 8 years. I mean, we had Minsk Agreement 1, we had Minsk Agreement 2, where they agreed that they would stop whatever that they were doing to the Russian-speaking who lived in Ukraine. So the whole background came from there. Now, whenever you are in Russia and whenever you are in Ukraine, you are Russian-speaking, it becomes a problem. It becomes a serious problem that you're not supposed to speak that language. You're not supposed to. So now Russia is becoming a taboo there. They must do whatever it takes to make sure that they will. In fact, the aim is to erase and delete Russian-speaking people there. So that is the background of that. The biolabs, the military, industrial complex was supposed to benefit from that through NATO. Number 3 was the natural resources. So those people were on the way. Same thing that they do in Gaza, where they're flattening Gaza. But the whole idea there's gas fields in Gaza that they want. So it's the same system there because it's the same masters that are doing the same thing there. So the background is equally the same. I'm not sure if I tried to summarize, but put a little bit of facts there.
Yeah, you're quite right, but obviously, let me just zone in on the NATO side of it, because it's linked to what we are discussing here. Obviously, if you are the United States, the only country that is capable of erasing you is Russia. China is gaining military prowess. It will take them at least 20 years for them to endanger the United States. So only Russia and the United States have got what they call the Nuclear Triad. So that is, they're able to deliver the nuclear weapons via the sea, that's submarines and ships. They're able to deliver it by air, that is intercontinental bombers. That is bombers that are capable to fly from one continent to the other. And they're able to deliver those bombs from silos. Only Russia is capable of that. So Russia is a strategic enemy of the United States. So NATO has been creeping, and you mentioned that there was an agreement between Gorbachev and the leadership of the United States to say NATO will not move an inch to the east. That is from the Berlin Wall. They were not going to move an inch from the Berlin Wall. In that intervening period, they have taken almost half of the countries that used to be this part of the Soviet Union. But Russia had always maintained that 3 countries will never join NATO. That is Ukraine, that is Belarus, and that is Georgia. Obviously, for Georgia, they went to 2008 because the separatists in Georgia were under attack. Belarus is the closest ally of Russia, is the only country that is hosting Russian weapons in terms of military arsenal. As a matter of fact, the attack that was launched in 2022 that went towards Kiev came from Belarus. However, Ukraine was so strategic in that there is no physical barrier between Russia and Ukraine. There are no rivers, there are no mountains. Historically, Napoleon from France tried to invade Russia through Ukraine. The British, during the so-called Crimea War of the 1800s, tried to attack Russia through Ukraine. Hitler, in 1939, 1940, tried to attack Russia through Ukraine. So that's why Russia is saying you can have all these countries, but Ukraine you cannot touch, because once you touch Ukraine, it means you can march straight to Moscow.
You are inside the house already.
So you would understand that obviously the United States wanted to provoke this war. However, they didn't expect Russia to respond in the manner that they've done. So obviously, Russia has got a lot of Soviet era equipment, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, they basically collected all their arsenals from all these countries back to Moscow, back to Russia. I mean, they stored them. So it's a threat to them. So this is a proxy war in a way to deplete the Russian military power so that Russia just remain with nuclear weapons. They will not intervene in Syria. They will not intervene in Gaza. They will not intervene in Burkina Faso when Traore is attacked. They just remain a target that is armed to the teeth but cannot fight a simple war because they won't have conventional weapons.
Yes.
However, but back to what we want to discuss. In 2015, there was a Minsk agreement that was signed.
Yes.
And we have the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France coming out and saying the Minsk agreement was just signed to prepare Ukraine for a war.
It was a delay tactic.
So now, during that time, the military apparatus of Ukraine was set up. Most importantly, their surveillance capability. Because remember, the Ukrainian army was a Soviet army, and the Soviet army was a Russian army. So they realized they cannot fight Russia with the Russian army. So the first thing that they did was to build capacity in surveillance satellites, was to build capacity in GPS signaling, which is important for drones, which is where we want to get. So drones are guided in 3 ways. They are guided via GPS, they are guided via fiber optic wire, but with a wire you cannot go more than 1 kilo because it literally pulls a wire. And they are guided via a data link. So the way a drone works is that it needs a GPS guidance, real-time GPS guidance to find its targets. And that's where Starlink comes in. Because Starlink is a satellite-based network that gives real-time input. So as a drone is flying into the air, through the air or in the water, they're able to fine-tune it real-time using Starlink, just like you and I are in this engagement because of the possibilities of network. We can talk real-time. So a drone works the same way. And they were able to set up Starlink beforehand and all the other satellites to be able to give Ukraine capabilities which even Russia itself does not fully have, which they're only gaining for the past 4 years of the war. So it takes us to a very dangerous precedent of how the West is using their technology, civilian technology, so they frame it, for military purposes and to the detriment of Russia in this instance, because on the first video that you have shown, that drone would have flown from Ukraine some 400, 600 kilometers with the guidance of Starlink. And we can say it without a doubt because, like I'm saying, there's 3 ways. You cannot use fiber optic wire. You cannot use data link. The Russians have become incredibly good at jamming signals from data link, because the way a data link is that there's a receiver, which is this is the drone, and then the power source. If you're able to come in between, you disrupt that energy. But you cannot jam Starlink. They have thousands of satellites in the low orbit of the Earth. So if you jam these, are able to move to the next satellite, and there are thousands of them. So that's what would have happened. And last week, when we look at this attempt, I think it was on Friday, there was an attempt on Putin. His helicopter was flying into Kursk. So Kursk is a border region with Ukraine. It was under Ukraine since last year, September, but the Russians early this year, they drove out Ukraine out of Kursk, and Putin was flying there with a military helicopter. First thing first, the Ukrainian, through the help of the Americans, were able to pick up from satellite that Putin is on the move. Ukraine does not have satellites. The only people that can know the movement of Putin becomes NATO, the United States in particular. The second part was Ukraine was able to fly a drone towards the helicopter that Putin was flying on, using the very same Starlink that we are now planning to bring in here. But maybe you can jump on it and let's talk about the significance of this geopolitical tool disguised as a civilian technology, but it's a military
a weapon.
Yes.
Look, so my question is, if I have a friend and I have an enemy, and now my friend is using, okay, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that Russia is supposed to be our friend, historically so. Correct. Supported us.
Correct.
In dark days when no one wanted to take us. I mean, Mandela said it himself. We asked the Americans if we could be housed and be helped. The Americans said no. And then we went to the Soviet direction, they helped us. We went to Cuba, they helped us. We went to Lusaka in Zambia, they helped us. Now, we should be in good terms. We should be loyal to somebody that has helped us. If the breed of leaders that the ruling party is producing, they should be going through inductions in understanding the historical background and facts of where we come from. There's a point that you've made about Russians. You said the Westerners think that if you take Putin out, then it's Christmas. No. There's this other guy who is the head of security, who was once a president of Russia, Medvedev. I mean, he's edging for this war. He wants to press because now he's the guy that has the codes now. If Putin said go for it, he would be happy to do that.
He's the deputy. He's the deputy chairperson of the Security Council.
Look at that.
That guy is in charge, and he's the same guy who says, "Let's just drop one nuclear weapon, and this will be over tomorrow."
You know. And another stupid thing that was said by the deputy president, who said, if Putin comes to South Africa, I'm going to arrest him. And that guy responded and said, anybody who will touch Putin, whoever he is, we will bomb your country. You know. Then the likes of former President Zuma ran to Putin to say, you know what, for peace sake, just stay, send Lavrov. It will be okay. Don't worry about what these guys are saying. So, but the point I'm driving, you are demonstrating, you are showing, and that you are not interested in the relationship. One, you now go and do a deal with somebody who is using a technology that is threatening a life of your friend. You know exactly what is happening. The second thing is the statements that have been coming from, we speak in folk tongue. How does this make us look in front of the Russian, in front of the BRICS partners? In that, before I go further, you might have seen that Iran came later to join BRICS. But in a space of a month or two, Russia and Iran already organized their own SWIFT system, their own payment system that a card from Iran works in Russia. Meanwhile, in South Africa, Russians were stuck here.
It's quite unfortunate.
You know, but and RT was cut off. And Russians that were some of my friends in Waterkloof could not use because they've been cut off. So if you open your multi-choice so-called DSTV, you go on 407 where RT was, they tell you that the EU has blocked the signal. EU.
Correct.
So are we getting instructions from EU? Are we getting instructions from where the prefect and the guys went to the principal's office in Washington? Where is this putting us on the map of things? On the BRICS partners, in front of Iran, in front of China, and maybe you'll heal me. Then Kumbunzo Tavel came and said, China has a better technology than Starlink. What is happening? in your own understanding, what is happening? I don't want to zoom too much on this local popcorn politics, but this, because it now involves, it's going on a global stage. It's no longer the intimate thing between the two countries. I mean, the prefect went and bowed to the principal and turned around and got lashing, and then they were given money with no conditions. So what is happening?
This is quite interesting. Let's look at Starlink a little bit so that we understand what it is. And I'll come back to the example you have mentioned, that it says we cannot watch RT because the feed that we were getting from multi-choice was coming from European satellites. We don't have connection to the direct feed to RT because of laws. It's not that the capability cannot be done, but because of laws that were in place to where we get our feed. So let's look at Starlink. First thing first, so that you understand Starlink. Starlink is a military contractor of the Pentagon. They are
number one
providing services right now for the Pentagon. What then tells you is that first, they are affiliated with the military architecture of the United States. And most importantly, it means they are affiliated with the military architecture of the West. Then what is the importance of you, if you are the West or NATO, of having this kind of technology? You will recall just before Obama left the office, there was a scandal that he was taping all the presidents of Europe, Germany, France. He was listening to their calls. It was a big scandal. And you ask yourself, these are big countries. These are countries which are far advanced militarily. But they were able to be hacked by the United States.
Yes.
And the way the United States work is that they use their civilian technology. Almost everything that you use has an American technology. You'll have to go through Microsoft. You'll have to go through Apple. You'll have to go through the network that we use is obviously going under the sea. Their servers are in the United States. You have to go through various clouds. These clouds are housed. Yes. Zoom is housed in the United States. So what the United States does is that they push their civilian technology as innocent and harmless. Then the way Starlink works is that it's obviously satellite-based. So you're getting your network directly from low orbit, from the satellite. The network that we are using, if you are using fiber, is wired physically by the wire, and you will have a receiver in your house. That receiver gives you the network. If you cut that wire, you cannot get internet. Then you've got your mobile networks. They have towers. If whether you're telecom, your MTN, you're getting your signal from those towers. It's a structured way. And obviously, MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, they are housed in South Africa. They are under the control of ICASA. They're under the control, state security, if they want, they can easily tap and listen to any call. That's why you have to RICA your SIM card so that they know who you are, where you are using your signal. All that does not work with Starlink. Starlink will not have a physical office in South Africa. They will not have any physical assets in South Africa. It's coming straight from space. You get your signal
to your house.
Today, if I'm a fugitive, they can cut my network. They can disable my network to ensure that I don't get any signal. They go to my mobile network, Vodacom, cut off this criminal who is a wanted man, they can cut it. Or Vodacom, hand over his records, we want to go after him. You cannot do that with Starlink. They're obviously not based in South Africa. So the plan will be, come here, dominate the network, destroy local competition, because you cannot compete with Starlink because they are cheaper. so that they remain the only sole provider of network. What happens? Government network move into Starlink. All of our operations move into Starlink. What then happens? The entire operations of the country, sensitive information, is now directly available for the United States to use at any given moment. So that is the danger that Starlink brings into this country.
Let me ask you a question. Can Starlink be used to influence the outcome of elections?
We just saw now how Trump got into power. You cannot disregard the influence of Elon Musk. Elon Musk bought Twitter during COVID at 45 billion, which was a ridiculous amount to pay. But he knew in 3 years' time, there's going to be election. He sponsored Trump. He makes sure that the Twitter platform is geared up for that. And remember, these things are linked. A day after Trump won the election, it was said that his net worth grew by 100 and so odd billion dollars, which is far more than what he has spent on Twitter. So yes, the question is yes. And the way it works is that because Musk is not in this for money, he's in this for power, he can make Starlink available to nearly everyone. And more so, these are packages. Similar way, they're able to say, you've got free to use apps like Twitter that you can access through Starlink. And on that Twitter platform, the propaganda will be pushed to suit a certain narrative. Same way it's able to push the genocide narrative. If you look at it, last week or 2 weeks ago, that Grok 3, the AI model of his, went rogue. Every answer you ask, if even you ask who won the Nedbank Cup in South Africa, it will say there's a white genocide in South Africa. If you ask who's the president of South Africa, there's a white genocide. So they couldn't streamline it so that it picked which one to answer, which no. So they will influence, not even as a matter of if they can, they will influence the next election in South Africa because of the interest they have.
You know, when we dig deep into these things, we normally follow the money. Or by understanding who owns this, who owns that. Now, you get to a two-way road where you have either the Rockefeller crew and the Rothschild crew. Now, these guys hate each other. But there's something that they're doing. So they take their fights to your back door. Like what happened in Ukraine. When Trump came, the Rockefeller script was saying, Zelensky must feel it. Call all the Rockefeller puppets, embarrass them.
Yes.
Then we go back and make a move. Zelensky was called to the Oval Office. He was embarrassed. They told him, they said, you need to pay back the money that we gave you. He said, never, I'm not going to pay the money. When he left US, where did he go? His bosses in London said, you need to roll the red carpet for our conmen. So all the EU leaders, gathered to say, oh, no, sorry, boy, it's okay. But when he finished in Europe, where did he go? Johannesburg. What was the significance of him coming here? What is it that now they will have in common? Musk. The other one is using Musk for his own agenda there. Now, was it him coming here to say, hey, let me tell you, my brother, those guys gave me help. They could come here and do 1, 2, 3, 4. When Trump said to Zelensky, what the hell you were doing in South Africa? You went to London to take orders. Go to South Africa. This is what
I'm saying. He cut the trip short. It was supposed to be 3 days. He spent 1 day, something. That means he was recalled.
Yes, he was recalled. But at the same time, remember, the time he was in South Africa, Putin increased the
Okay.
whipping. Yes, sending the message. Who the hell you think you are? You're not even a president. You are back as your professional comedian because that's what he is. His term for office has expired. But I want to get to a certain point. So when he went back to Kiev, he sat down. They said, okay, Elon, tell him you're not going to share a Russian position. And then Elon said, it's fine. I'm not going to share. 2, Trump says, I will tell Pentagon, I will instruct Pentagon not to send any supplies for your military hardware. You're going to stop. And Russia will be coming for you because you're not thinking. You're not even a president. You are a bully. You are this, you are that. What did that do to Zelensky? He went back to his bosses to say, what do I do? They said, okay, what can be the compromise here? What can you do? He said, no, but we have the natural resources that you guys, like your Biden and Hunter, the businesses that they have, including Victoria Nuland herself, and the owner of Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, your Dick Cheney, they all have these businesses, the Bill Clintons, they all have these businesses there in like your Odessa, their properties there. Now, he pushed, he said, no, but that money you gave us for free, he said, this guy said, no, you have to sign a deal with us. Because Elon said, I'm going to turn off Starlink, you won't get positions. Russia is going to come for you with full force, and we're not going to give you anything to defend yourself. That's when the EU congregated to say, hey, come. When they were caught in that table sniffing cocaine, your Macron and Stemmer and all these guys. The Americans got what they wanted, to control the natural resources. Now, immediately after the deal, they said, okay, now talk. What happens in their terms? Weeks later, the prefect in South Africa goes to the principal's office with his toughest shining, with his blazer. He got to the principal's office with the landlord, embarrassed them. Behind closed doors, you will get Starlink into South Africa.
Correct.
You see, now, after everything you have explained about Starlink, for people to understand that this is a military hardware, this is a weapon, this is a mass grab of information, this is a mass surveillance system. Now, the landlord said, oh, Elon, come to South Africa, we want you, the crime is too high.
Perfect.
And it's here, it's happening now, you're getting this, this is being gazetted, this is going to be doing this, but the agenda is done. So if people understood that the families, now the Rockefeller is back in South Africa, yet we still have a principal, a prefect, who subscribed into the Rothschild orbit. Now, the Rockefellers are back with full force. They dictate what they want you to do. So it's not our fight. It's their fight there. But once the deal is done, Hento said, there won't be any offices. It's this. They're watching you.
And so to pick on that, to link this, Starlink and what you're discussing, let's look at the problem statement that Rupert is presenting as a case for Starlink. He's saying there's a high crime in South Africa, and the police need the assistance of Starlink. There, he's confessing, and he mentioned that we need drones. He is telling you that Starlink is capable of controlling these drones, which answers our earlier question to say, how is Ukraine operating this? So, because look at it from a network point of view. South Africa has almost 100% network coverage.
Yes.
If you go to the Kruger's Park today, you will find network. If
Yeah.
you go to even some part of Lesotho, deep in Lesotho, you can still pick up South African network.
Here in
So-
Swaziland too, MTN.
So you see, so South Africa does not have a network issue. So Starlink is proposed as a solution for places which does not have network infrastructure. Almost every fifth village in South Africa has a tower, Eskom tower, or Telkom tower, MTN. We don't have a network problem. So it cannot be that the so-called network problem is the reason why we need Starlink. It cannot be that Rupert goes in there and say, we have a high crime rate, we need Starlink, we need drones. Obviously, the drones are going to come, we like it or not. But they're not going to serve the purpose that we think they will serve. They're going to conduct a massive surveillance in this country, which we cannot even comprehend. Right now, I'm not too sure in other places. In Gauteng, almost every corner in Gauteng, there's a camera that is installed. You don't know who is behind that camera. You don't know where the server is going. They see cameras are fixed, they're not going to work. So now you're going into the drones, which will then be operated through Starlink. Second part, one of the easiest way crime intelligence is able to pick up crimes is because they do obviously tap in from through the networks. They're able to listen to operations when people are talking and all those things. Obviously, that's going to go. We're now going to be completely off the grid. I'm not the one who condone government listening into private conversations. But you have to understand that there are circumstances that compels them to say, if they need to stop a cash transit heist, they need to be able to tap into the people that are talking to each other. All that is going to go. It will be completely off the grid, which means your high priority crimes, which can be linked to the same Rockefeller people. Remember, they use crime to destabilize the country.
Yes, on
they will
purpose.
make sure this country is not investable. You will see a high crime rate in terms of priority crime. General Mkhwanazi, then KZN, he cries and says, if we are given good intelligence, we can stop these criminals. They cannot win a gun battle with us, but we don't have intelligence. So that's what it's bringing. But coming back to the geopolitical significance of South Africa. South Africa has always occupied the minds of the Western world since the 1800s.
Yeah.
Remember when the Boer came to South Africa, we were probably one of the few countries, we were not colonized by a country. We were colonized by a company, the Dutch East Indian Company.
Yep.
The Dutch government was too busy in Asia to take over South Africa as a colony. The Dutch never colonized us, the Netherlands. However, the Dutch East Indian Company became a private entity that colonized the country. And that set a trend almost 400 years later. South Africa is still colonized by private interests that are now being backed by powerful countries. So then, throughout, South Africa has always occupied the interests of the West. And obviously, we couldn't even get our independence under the disguise that if the black government come into power, the communism is going to take over South Africa. And if communism takes over South Africa, it's going to take over the rest of the continent. But now the significance is that the United States is preparing for a war with China. It's a known thing.
And while you're there, but I just want to add on that line before it leaves my head. People must understand that America's target is not Russia, it's not Iran, it's China. That's it. Carry on, Put.
Very well, but continue with that theme. It links to what we're discussing. Trump is a very smart guy. He says, my target is China. However, if China is supported by Russia, I cannot defeat them. His initial idea was to say, let me end the Ukrainian war so that I can bring Russia and China, isolate China and deal with them. He then said, I also don't have business with Iran that much. Let me try to cut a deal with them, because Netanyahu want to fight Iran for his own business. Because I also don't have a business with Iran. I cannot afford to fight Iran now. My target is China.
China.
But then,
And it's not,
back to us.
and it's an open secret.
The military generals of the United States, there's a video, maybe we'll share it next time, where he comes and says, we're going to fight China in the next 5 years. That's how open they are. They're not even beating by the bush. But then come to South Africa. From October of 2023, the Houthis in Yemen blockaded the Suez Canal.
Yes.
Nothing could pass there. You are the United States. You want to fight a war with China. The quickest way to get to China is through the Suez Canal. And you realize how easy it can be blocked. And you realize that China has a base in Djibouti, right at the mouth of the Suez Canal. You realize, no, I need an alternative direction. Last year, the last trip and the only trip Biden made into Africa, he went to Angola. A Biden who could barely think, who can barely be conscious. He went to Angola of all countries.
Yes.
Angola is strategically placed. They've got oil. They sit on the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes.
China was interested to go there. China was interested to link Angola all the way to the eastern part of Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, so that they can have a direct route.
Yes.
The United States go there to Angola and say, hold on, you are with us. Because they need the base of Africa, because you cannot go through Suez Canal, you have to go around the so-called Cape of Good Hope.
And I must also add there that the biggest consumer of oil in the whole entire world is an American Navy. They wouldn't strategize themselves in a position where there's no oil. So I'm supporting your statement of why they went to Angola. Yes.
They are building supply depots to fuel a war with China. It's not going to be a common war like Iraq. So now you come to South Africa. Few things are happening in South Africa that link to this thing. You mentioned earlier, but that the business interests, which is represented by the Rockefellers, are interested in South Africa. But the deep state, the military hawks of the United States are now interested in South Africa.
Yes.
For military purposes.
Yes.
You cannot afford South Africa to fall into Russia, to fall into China, because you need it to navigate. And what do? They are destroying Transnet, so that all those harbors become commercially owned. And if they're commercially owned, those harbors will turn into naval bases during that war with China when it happened. So we are causing cross, and they know the only way, the easiest way to destabilize a country like ours is through the racial lines. They cannot use the tribal line anymore. It's very difficult to get South African tribes to fight each other in South Africa these days. You can get outsiders, the xenophobia, you can do that, but you cannot get, as much as they are deep misunderstanding, you cannot get a Sotho person to fight a Zulu person, a Tsonga person to fight a Venda. We have learned to live with each other.
Yes.
So you drop that anger. The only readily made people that are ready to destabilize the country become the Afrikaner. Create a condition where you say the Afrikaner is under threat, intervene to say you are coming to rescue him. Secure your strategic assets. 60% of the US platinum comes from South Africa, 60%. It tells you the military infrastructure of America cannot operate without platinum. It means they cannot operate without South Africa. This is what makes South Africa strategically important from a geography point of view, from a strategic point of view. And they are already inciting us. America have got a base in Botswana. 2 minutes, a fighter jet can move from Botswana to Union Building. They can bomb us. So the pressure is building up around South Africa so that we're able to concede, and we have already conceded. Starlink is going to them. Watch the space. The harbor in Richards Bay will soon be a military base. Last year, they landed there, and no one knows what they were doing. So that's where we are at in terms of this occurrence that's happening with Starlink.
And it was also very interesting that one of the trips I took to Mpumalanga, the American Air Force were in Kruger National Park. When there was chaos in Mozambique, they were on standby to go and help their puppet, whoever is their puppet there. But I also want to thank you for making time to come out so we have this conversation, and we would like to share a lot of these conversations with people. This platform was created to speak on things that you wouldn't dare speak on or about in the mainstream media. So that's all we have for tonight. We will recap in the next couple of days. Sunday, I think we're coming back on Sunday. People can write questions. They can send it through to the YouTube channel, ask questions, even in between the show or even after the show. Sometimes for us, it's easier to read the comments when the show is finished, and then maybe before we start the next show, then we acknowledge and we respond to some of this, because it's very helpful to see people participating in what we're discussing, because this kind of history, you're not going to learn about it at school. Nobody will tell you the real reason why certain things are happening. Nobody will tell you what is behind the behind. I've always said to people, there's no government, it's corporations, it's companies. And today you came to heal many people that I've always said to them, follow the money. Now you've unpacked something to say South Africa was never colonized by a country, it was a company. And it's a fact, you know, and there's no two ways about it. You saw your hand, Rupert, there, product of the Dutch East Indian Company. So I would like to thank the viewers, and I would like to thank everyone. They can pass the comment, but that's all we have for tonight. And thank you very much. Thank you.
BM Network, it's your time to tune in. Stories that connect where we all begin.